Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 261 was an absolutely sensational one. And this was simply down to the fact that the author showcased some of the most jaw-dropping plot points being tackled here. As fans know, Gojo was expected to return to the battlefield, and he certainly did that in the previous chapter. However, not in the way fans expected him to. While Gojo did truly return to the battlefield, at least physically, the person who had taken control of the body was not Gojo, but Yuta. Fans were completely confused as to how this was even possible at first. Thankfully, as JJK chapter 261 continued, it became clear that Yuta had used his copy technique to make this possible. However, with Yuta now in Gojo's body, fans are wondering as to whether he will return to his old body or not. Yuta Okkotsu played a major role in JJK chapter 261. In fact, this chapter was absolutely incredible for his character progression, and it just goes to show that among all the sorcerers from the new generation, Yuta is cut above the rest. This doesn't necessarily mean that Yuta is the strongest. This just means that Yuta has the most resolve out of them all, and that he is truly ready to discard his humanity and actually go on to become a monster. Yuta clearly mentioned that himself in the previous chapter. He knew that Gojo always wanted to be the monster to protect everyone, but now Yuta wants to do the same, because the actual monster isn't around anymore. Coming over to how Yuta's body switch was made possible in the first place. There are many phases to how this change came about. The first things were the prerequisites that needed to be met in order for this to happen. Of course, in order for Yuta to take control of Gojo's body, Gojo himself had to die. This happened in the fight against Sukuna, where the world-splitting dismantle chopped him in half. His body was then transported to Shoko using Yuji's curse technique. In the meanwhile, Yuta decided to defeat Kenjaku with help from Todo. Once Kenjaku's head was chopped off, Yuta stabbed him with cursed energy right in his brain, and right after, he had Rika consume Kenjaku. With that, he gained access to Kenjaku's body-hopping cursed technique. Yuta then returned to the battlefield to fight against Sukuna. He originally intended to fight Sukuna on his own and deal deadly damage to him. Unfortunately for him, he couldn't end the battle on his own and was chopped in half using the world-splitting dismantle, which ended Gojo as well. Thanks to Rika, he was barely able to stay alive for a while. However, his consciousness was slowly fading and it was time for him to make the switch. Thankfully, due to the ability that he copied from Kenjaku, he was able to switch to Gojo's body, which by this time had been stitched up by Shoko. This gave Yuta access to Gojo's body and all of his techniques, along with his memories. Now, Yuta is incredibly strong, far stronger than before, and he is a massive threat to Sukuna himself. In JJK's chapter 261, Yuta and Sukuna clashed once again, only this time. The former was utilizing Gojo's body. The two unleashed powerful domain expansions, with Yuta launching Unlimited Void and Sukuna launching Malevolent Shrine at him. This domain clash is going to be absolutely incredible, and fans cannot wait to see how things go from here onwards. However, a bigger worry that every fan has on their mind right now is what happens to Yuta. In the last chapter, it was made clear that Yuta only has a 5-minute time limit on his body swap. This is because that is how long Yuta can fully manifest Rika for and use copy. This means that once 5 minutes are up, anything could happen to him. There isn't a clear-cut answer as to what is going to happen to Yuta. Given that his main body was dying, there is a massive possibility that Yuta cannot actually return to the body. As such, this could have been a one-way ticket for Yuta to the afterlife. Once the 5 minutes are up, Yuta can either die immediately or die a rather slower death as he loses cursed energy. It is also possible for Yuta to stay in Gojo's body forever, provided the technique requires activation only once. Then, theoretically, Yuta could also swap to another body in the future and live just like Kenjaku did. Fans don't know what is going to happen to his body from here onwards. The answer to whether Yuta can return to his real body or not is a very complicated one. For one, fans should keep in mind that right now, Yuta has discarded the possibility of returning to his body himself. He seems to be adamant to either die fighting this battle or die when the time runs out. Yuta could potentially stay in Gojo's body. However, given how the story has been going for the sorcerers, this seems rather unlikely. It would also be somewhat weird for Yuta to utilize the body of Gojo, which in a way is being desecrated. As such, once the time limit is up, it is highly likely that Yuta will either die slowly or he will simply realize that he can actually stay in Gojo forever. He could also get the chance to go back to his body. In order for that to happen, his corpse would need to be stitched up by Shoko and healed to the best possible condition. Then, Yuta can potentially activate Kenjaku's curse technique again and take control of his own body. This would also grant respect to Gojo and give him a proper burial in case he doesn't return. That seems to be the best possibility for Yuta. The worst and the most likely possibility is that Yuta simply doesn't return any. He dies in the aftermath of this battle, entrusting everything else to Yuji. Yuta has certainly taken an incredibly brave step, but from here onwards, his fate is in the hands of the author. The two biggest possibilities are for Yuta to either die immediately or for him to return to his old body. Him staying in Gojo's body forever is a very unlikely possibility, and fans need to simply wait and see which way the author goes.